Hello, students of the long 19th century. So I'm glad you have decided to take this course at Park University with us, or that you are watching this on my YouTube channel and you are just going to be an armchair historian today. All are welcome, and I'm very glad that you're joining us. Just ask that you would give a thumbs up if you're liking this to show me I'm doing a good job. So, as we begin this course in the long 19th century, I always think it's very valuable to take some time to just kind of explore what is history and just the general nature of the topic. In this course that we call the long 19th century, and I'm going to get into this in just a minute, a bit more, but I think that this is a time of incredible transformative change. The reason we study the long 19th century is because there are so many things that are going on in this just a little bit more than a century chunk of time. And therefore, we are giving this special attention. And what I would like to do is just kind of introduce myself, introduce the course, and talk just briefly about the study of history and why we do what we do. So I am your professor in this course. I'm David Hill, and I had completed my doctorate at the University of Kansas, and I have studied there classical, medieval, and European history. Previously, I have attended Missouri State University, where I also studied British and European history for my bachelor's degree and a master's degree there. In addition to that, I studied classics as well as religious studies, and am finishing up at Duke Divinity School, so I'm interested in theology as well. So I'm a native son of the Kansas City area. I've lived here kind of all my life, in and around here. I was fortunate enough to be able to attend Oxford University for a short time, as well as the University of London Imperial College, and was able to study with some really good people there, and really broaden my perspective on European history. And so we don't just teach this from an American perspective per se, but we are going to try to look at this time period in history through a lens of really European thought. And this really isn't a course on world thought, but as I studied at European universities, they just have a different perspective. So I hope to bring this to the class, and I hope that you will come to appreciate this to some degree. Now, I wanted to talk to you just for a bit about, well, what is history itself? So I think you can define history in a lot of ways, but I'm gonna just kind of break this down into kind of four succinct categories here. So history can be defined as just simply facts, just one damn thing after another, as a historian once said. This can be kind of boring and mundane, but history can be just simply described as facts, right? What actually happened? What is historical truth? Not some grander form of metaphorical or analytical truth, but it is just simply it is one thing after another. The literal facts of the past. So, other than that, which is not really what we're going to be looking at, though we will be studying the facts of the long 19th century. History, I think, is better defined as causes, a study of causes and ends. So you're looking at change in the past, and you're going to define what this change was and why then it happened. History can also be seen as a kind of an interpretive social science, where you're going to employ critical reasoning. You're going to explain facts. You're going to explain how human societies developed, why certain virtues or morals or cultural practices began, and why are these occurring? Why are these? What were the underlying factors that created the cultures that create this world? And finally, I think that history is also can be considered an art and a philosophy of telling the stories that make up our own cultures in the human past. And I think there is a great beauty within this. And also, as we tell these stories about our culture, they can and have moved away from sort of a literal historical truth to sort of this grander story of who we are and how we define ourselves, and also that this has great value in teaching us in the present. While the story of Horatius Cocles, a famous Roman who stood alone on a bridge and defended the city of Rome against an Etruscan attack, whether that actually literally happened, I don't know. But it is a great and moral story that inspired Winston Churchill, who then inspired a nation to fight against Nazis. Right at the Battle of Britain, Churchill had to make a decision, right before the Battle of Dunkirk, Churchill had to make a decision, and he said that this story, as he read it, inspired him as he picked up his copy of Livy. And it inspired him to dig in and fight when others were unwilling to do so. So history, I think, has this enormous power to inspire us in the present as well. And if history has no value to the present, then I don't know really the point of what we're doing here. But we are, of course, primarily going to be focused on interpreting the past. And while this can have great power and meaning to our present lives, we are really going to be keeping the focus of this course on understanding and interpreting the past. And historians do this through the use of two sources. The first and most important are primary sources, and those are actual documents, material culture, anything that is contemporaneous with the period that you are studying. So, for instance, a biography written about Winston Churchill in 2009 is not a primary source. However, Churchill's memoirs of his time during World War II, that is a primary source if you are studying Winston Churchill or the period of World War II. Secondly, historians use secondary sources. So that would be the biography written about Winston Churchill in 2009. That is a secondary source. So we use primary sources to define our research and define or to explain why changes happen. And we use secondary sources, expert testimony written by other historians or journalists, things like this. We use that to support our claims. That if we have a thesis about why Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo, we of course need to found this thesis upon primary documents. But we can also use the work of other historians and great thinkers to support these claims. Now, the grander arc of historiography, kind of the history of history. Historians have interpreted the past through a variety of lenses and ways of thinking. This is kind of where you get into the art and philosophy of things. Traditionally, historians have, or for the first, really since the historical discipline was created, have seen, or it was a study of great men. It was a study of politics, of kings, of political developments, of high culture, of rich and powerful people. And history was seen as a progressive arc. The historians, as a proper discipline, a professional discipline, really only begins about in the 1870s. So it's kind of even at the tail end of the period of this course that we are currently in. But historians saw history as developing as a progressive arc, that things are going to begin here and they're going to get better and better and better and better and better, and we build on this until we sort of have reached a utopia. And this comes out of Enlightenment philosophy and the belief that human beings can make a grand and better society every day, that things are going to get better. Discoveries and technologies are going to make life much better. This is kind of a rejection of the older wisdom that God is in charge of everything and God is directing human affairs. Rather, progressive Whig historians, as they're often called, see humans as the primary movers and shakers, and that they are building a progressive vision, right? That things are just always going to be getting a little bit better. And the only problem with this theory, of course, is that the world wars occurred. So when you have World War I and you have World War II and hundreds of millions of people die and suffer and your entire society is destroyed, it's hard to argue that that was part of this grander progressive arc of history. So after World War II, really after World War I, but definitely after World War II, there began to be a change in focus in historical schools of thought. And it was a shift from